Great. So, coffee break is over. Hope you enjoyed your beverages, pastries. We're now continuing with the second session, ELG platform, the final release and the functional overview, demo and tutorial. Two of the people we need for this are here in the room with us, and the third one will be patched in from Athens, Greece, via Teams. So let me welcome on stage Ian Roberts and Remy Calizano from the technical team, and Penny Labopoulou will join us virtually. So the stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. Before we start on this session, I've just been asked to do a quick advertising pitch. So mainly for the benefit of those watching online, but also you're welcome to look at this if you're in the room as well. We have our friends from the ELITA project who are doing automatic transcription and live subtitling in 42 languages of all the sessions as they run at this conference today. If you're interested in following along with subtitles in your own language, then please go to the URL here. It's also, for those of you online, this is also being shared in the Zoom chat, elita.eu/events/metaforum 2022. And please, yes, feel free to have a look at that. So this session, as Georg says, is going to be a kind of more of an in-depth technical tour of the ELG platform and the different aspects of it. We will start with Penny from Athens, who will talk about the catalogue and the metadata side of things. Then I will talk in a bit more detail about the LT services and how to use and contribute LT services to the platform. And then I will finally hand over to my colleague Remy from DFKI in Berlin, who will talk a bit about some of the tools that we have provided to help programmers work with the ELG platform. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Penny Labopoulou from LSP in Athens. Penny, I think, should be there on the online. Hi, Penny, can you hear us?
Hi, Ian. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear.
Yep, so we'll hand over to Penny for the first section of this talk.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry for not being able to be there with all of you physically, but at least we can remotely see each other. So, good morning and welcome to the second session. Well, as Ian said, go through an overview of the catalog. For those of you who have seen previous releases, okay, we have some enhancements, we have some new features, and but the classic way of entering into the catalog is through the same address bar that we had before, live.europeanlanguagegrid.eu. This is where you will discover, try out, use and download services and resources for European languages and do some extra features, extra functionalities as well. You can either enter through the search bar that we used to have, but we also have a brand new navigation bar, a brand new menu through which you can go directly to the catalog or to subsets of the catalog, either the tools and resources, organizations, companies and research organizations or projects. Let me go to the catalog. Very similar to what you already knew. The basic view is still the same of the catalog, alphabetically sorted resources, sorting options to the right, pretext bar and the facets, but some of the facets have been changed. We still have the choice between the language resources and technologies. As you all know, we have corporate data sets, lexica, terminologies, glossaries, machine learning models, language models, computational grammars, and language descriptions that cannot be categorized otherwise. Tools and services with various service functions, basic NLP tools and services, but also fully fledged applications like machine translation, etc. This is one of the new changes in this release. This facet now has grouped together the long list of values that we have. And I'm not going into details for this because Ian will explain to you a little bit more later on. Language grid. Without languages, we couldn't do anything. So these are all the languages for which either the resource contents are in one of these languages, or the tool service supports it either as input or output. Obviously, all the official EU languages, of course, as Georg said, not all of them to the same degree covered. And of course, more languages, national, regional, minority from all over Europe and all over the world. In various media types, text is still the main modality, but we have also a lot of audio resources for speech recognition and speech synthesis. Images and videos are also coming very strongly. Image classification, video for sign language videos, as well as other types of videos as well. When it comes to searching, one cannot go without the license. It's a very long list. And of course, a facet that was there before, it has been further enhanced with conditions of use that can be used for searching, for discovering resources, for all the standard licenses. I keep talking about resources, but as Georg said, what is important in ELG is that each organization can also have its own page, its own visiting card, let's say. We have the yellow pages of organizations. You can find companies and research organizations, not only those that have contributed resources already to the ELG catalog, but any organization that is active in the language technology wider area. Mainly developers and integrators, of course, not users, because that would make the catalog too huge. The catalog of projects will soon be increased with work that we are currently working on. Where do these all metadata records come from? Obviously from the ELG consortium, the ELE crowdsourcing initiative that Stelios mentioned before, and a little bit more will be shown tomorrow at the ELE day. And of course, collaborating partners, the ELRA catalog of language resources, and we've built bridges, as Stelios said, to many catalogs that also have resources that are of interest to language technology. The three Clarin nodes, Hugging Face, we're already importing datasets and will soon be importing metadata records from them for models. Again, I'm not going into details because this was also mentioned in the previous session. So this is a huge catalog. How can you search? We have the free text bar, which can be used with a simple search or advanced queries, Lucene queries. So I'm now making a scenario where a company is looking for corporate data sets that they can use to train a model for parsing. And let's say that they're interested in a specific language, Italian. And since they want to train them, they want to also make sure that these are hosted in ELG so that they can quickly download them. The snippets are a bit similar as to the way they were in release 2 with keywords, licenses, and versions. Let's have a closer look at one of them. The view page has slightly changed, but the main idea is that you have the top section with the identity information, resource name, version, whether something is hosted in ELG, a number of metadata, technical metadata, classification section in this area, free text keywords, how this dataset can be used in what types of application and tasks, and depending on the resource type, you have some further classification. So for corpora, for instance, whether it's raw or annotated, for lexica, whether it's an ontology, a computational dictionary, or a term or a thesaurus. Very important for your choice of resources, a description. human readable description with the contents of the resource, size, how it has been used, how it was created. Technical metadata through the ELG metadata schema that has been mentioned before. For its part, you have to specify the language, obviously. If it's multiple languages, you might have to give some more information about the multilinguality type, text types, annotation types in the case of annotated corpora. Again, very important, links to documents that give user manuals or other publications. Information about creators and creation details, ethical information, whether it includes personal or sensitive data, whether they have been anonymized. A second tab will give you the chance to see how you can access, how you can download this resource, information about the form, whether it's accessed by with an interface or whether it's downloadable, size and format, licensing terms. If the license is open and the resource is hosted in ELG, you can directly download it. If it was accessed through another catalog, here you would have a link to the access location. So without any further choice, okay, you're asked and you can save locally your resource. If it's an open license, you don't have to be logged in. Anyone can download the resource. If you're logged in, you get some extra features through the consumer's grid, as Stelio said, and I will show you in a moment. For the time being, let me show you a little bit more about the page, some additional information. And before I forget that, of course, download can be made and the search can be made through the interface. This is what I'm showing you right now, but you can also download one or more data sets and integrate them in your workflow through the Python SDK that Remy will show you a bit later. In release 3, we have a new addition. We have the DOI, that's a persistent identifier that is assigned through DataSite by ELG. We actually give the DOI only to hosted data and ELG compatible services that actually come not just to metadata records. In this case, you also get the citation text that you can copy. We have for each resource, 2 DOIs at least, one for the specific version and another one following the Zenodo approach, what we call concept record. You have a DOI that groups together all the versions. So if you use this identifier, you'll always be redirected. The right side bar as before, but it has been enriched. You can share the item through your social media. You can export the metadata record in a number of schemas and formats, ELG and MSOL already, DataSite, and DCAT is coming up as well very soon. You have links to other versions. You can view counts and statistics about the views and downloads for the specific version or for all versions if this resource has more than them. And of course, you have all the administrative information as an extra link to a page where you can find more information about the resource or a contact email, information about the funding project and the provider of the resource. This is very important. Through this link, you can go and see the organization that has provided. The view page for organization is very similar to the ones for resources, identity, classification, what are the areas of expertise of each organization, a description, contact information in the right side, like office address, what they are, whether it's an academic institution, and what they usually do within our community, in the language technology community. A special tab for the resources that they have created or provided, through which you can go back to the resource, and the projects that they have coordinated or participated and are included also in ELG. If it's a big organization like a university, all divisions can have their own page as well, as if they were autonomous organizations. Let me show you also the link. As we said, you can go to the funding project. Again, the identity section with categories and the name, short description, all the coordinators and participating organizations, the resources that have been funded through this project. This is one of the open call projects from phase 1, if I recall, were in ELG. And through them, you can go again back to any of the resources that you want. So, as I said, if you are not logged in, you can still download resources that are available with open licenses. If they're restrictive, you may be asked to authenticate yourself, to authorize yourself, and log in the system before being allowed to download the resource. In this case, I have already logged in. You can create an account very easily through the icon that you will find on the menu. This is one of the additions that we have in this release. That's the consumer's grid. This is the provider's grid, but nevertheless, this first part is the same. This is where you can have, you can see all the activities that, or your interactions with ELG. You can see your daily usage, how many calls of services you have made, and how many bytes you can still have for processing. This will be further elaborated by Ian afterwards. And you have links to what you have already, to the services that you have already used, and your downloads. Remember that I previously downloaded a data set. You can see your latest download and or see more details when you downloaded that and through the source and which license, because some of the data sets come with various licenses. If you're a provider, as I am, you also have access through a page to the items that you have already contributed, that you have already registered in ELG. How do you do that? Let me go to the grid. I said this first part is the same for consumers and providers. This second set of boxes is dedicated to providers. They can have a link to the items that they have created. That's the page I showed you just a moment ago. You can also upload XML metadata records in ELG format. This is very convenient for experts or technical minded persons that want to upload similar resources, multiple similar resources, let's say 20 bilingual corpora where the only change is the languages. Before importing them, they can validate them with an XML validator. But for the typical users, you can also use the interactive editor. So the interactive editor will allow you to first select the resource type, grammar, lexical, corpus service, or item type, project or organization, so that it shows you the form. For the sake of time, I have already created a metadata record for a corpus, since we're concentrating on corpora. The editor has horizontal tabs and vertical tabs in order to group the information. We only have the mandatory and recommended metadata here so that it's easier for users to add them. All mandatory metadata are marked with an asterisk, and each of the tabs is groups semantically similar metadata information. The first horizontal tab is for resources, for elements that are common to all resources. So the identity that I talked about before, name, identifier, short name, some description, version, provider, and creator. Obviously, for all of them, depending on the element type, you get auto-completion mode, some examples that help you to find them. Categories, domain label only, contact, landing page, or email. Very useful, though not mandatory. Links, documents that like user manuals and publications that will help the consumers to find more information, see how they can use your resource. A second tab, which is specific to Corpora. You could also have one for tool services, would be different. For Corpora, we're asking for corpus subclass and information about the ethics, as we said before. Language, according to the BCP 47, it looks scary, but it's not, because this is because you can select the language based on the auto-completion mode. Corpus, as we said, you can always upload your data. You can upload multiple data sets. All you need to do is browse through your computer and find a compressed file, zip-tar or ZZ, in order to upload it. Very, very important is the distribution. In what form this is available? Is it downloadable? Is it accessible through interface? If you have uploaded a data set, you can, it's yearly marked. If it's available through another catalog, through a GitLab repository or another location, you will be prompted to fill in one of these informations. Of course, size, text format, and very important, the license with which the resource is available. Once you're done and you've filled in all the mandatory information, you can stop and come back at any time you want. You click on save. There's a basic validation process on XML. And when you're satisfied with your description, you can check the view page, which is similar to what the user will see, and you can submit it for publication. When it's submitted for publication, as you can see on the status bar, the ELG technical team, that's us, will be notified. We'll go through the metadata and data. We will check that the metadata are consistently describing what the contents in your data say, that your data set is not, does not contain any viruses. Especially for services, there are more things to tackle, and Ian will say a little bit more about that. And when we're finished, we will publish it, and it will be shown on the public catalog. So I give the floor now to Ian to speak about the services.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you for that very detailed and comprehensive overview of the metadata catalogue, and that's part of the European Language Grid platform. What I'm going to concentrate now is tell you a bit more specifics about tools and services in the ELG platform. So as Penny alluded to, there are a number of metadata elements in that model that are specific to tools and services beyond what you have just for data resources. And I'll just sort of show you a few of those as I go. Where are we? There we go. So if I look at the tools and resources, and I look for tools and services, there we go. So the particular one which Penny mentioned is an important one is this service function. So the way that we work in ELG is that we break down the service types by these kind of high-level functions, if you like, text processing, translation, and so on. But these top-level categories are not usually exclusive. So, like, for example, if we look under speech processing, we've got speech synthesis under here. But if we look under natural language generation, you've got speech synthesis listed under there as well. So these are kind of high-level categories rather, but that group the lower-level categories. And essentially the idea when you look at one of these service metadata records is that you have to specify essentially what data you are processing, what you do with it, and what you're going to produce as the output. So I'm going to drill down and show you an example of one of these now. Let's have a look. I'm just going to put this into full screen so we've got a bit more height. So if I look at, say, semantic annotation, for example, so I've got a number of research results here, and most of them you'll see say for information. These are just kind of records that have been imported from other catalogues that represent maybe software that you can download from GitHub or services that run elsewhere. But there are, obviously, the ones that are particularly of interest to us are these ones that are labelled ELG compatible service, and these are the ones which are fully integrated in the ELG platform and run within the ELG cluster. So, as Penny said, obviously a lot of this will be familiar because a lot of the model is the same across all of these. For the ELG compatible services, we have these citation DOIs, the same as we do for ELG hosted data resources. But rather than the kind of the corpus information that Penny showed you, what we have here is, as I said, for services and tools, you specify the input resource, which is the type of data that it processes. The function is what it does with the data, in this case semantic annotation, because that's what I was drilling down to in the catalogue. And the output resource is is what it will produce at the end. So in this case, we have, excuse my voice, in this case we have a service that takes as input a text file in one of many different languages. It performs the functions of semantic annotation and lemmatization, and it produces an output a JSON file with annotations for word senses and lemmas. So again, this is all much the same as the records that Penny showed you previously. We have the same kind of descriptive metadata, things like the human readable description and the search keywords and categorization and so on. The service function that I've just described there. For services and particularly for integrated services, this is all, as Stelio said before, this is all done using containerization Docker images. So the distribution types for an integrated service will be a Docker image, or in this case, 2 Docker images. And I'll get back to why this is a little bit later on. So the idea is that with publicly available services like this, anyone can basically pull the Docker image, run it locally on their own machine if they want to do it that way, or they can call it via the ELG APIs and call the version that's running in the ELG cluster. The license conditions are specified here, so you can see what restrictions there are on the use of this particular service. So how do we actually use these services that are running in ELG? Well, there's a number of ways that we can do that. So there's some code samples on one of these integrated services have this tab code samples, which will give you some various ways that you can call a service. So for example, the simplest example here is a curl command. Now curl, for anybody who's not familiar with it, is a command line tool for making HTTP requests. So here we're simply saying pass some plain text from this file and send it to this URL. And so this is essentially the API endpoint for the particular service. And these API endpoints will always look the same. It's this bit on the end that is the kind of unique identifier for an individual service. Authentication, you have to authenticate in order to call these services. I'm logged in at the moment to ELG. But the authentication is handled using access tokens, and typically if you were going to be calling these things from your own code, you would use the standard OAuth OpenID Connect mechanisms to obtain access tokens. For the curl example, we just give you a short-lived token that you can copy and paste in and play with. But in a more typical example, as Remy will show you in a bit, for example, with our Python SDK that we've developed, that handles all the authentication tokens and everything for you. So you can just say, I want to call the service with this ID, and it will prompt you for authentication token to generate your authentication token. But again, these are the sort of public APIs, but again, for ease of being able to try out test services as you look at them. So we have a try out tab. So typically, any fully integrated service here will have this try out tab, which is a very simple JavaScript user interface that populates itself based on what's declared in the metadata record. So for example, this service declares that it takes a parameter for the language of the input text. This is some service, multilingual services will take the language as a parameter. Some will provide a different endpoint for each language. Some will just not care if they can accept any input in multiple languages without knowing up front which one it is. And that parameter data again gets pulled through into the user interface. So I'm going to do a quick example here. Here it talks about, for example, the sentence, the secretary typed the letter, will disambiguate secretary and letter using the semantic annotation. So here you just provide the text to annotate. I'm not going to bother supplying a language because it was an optional parameter. I submit that for processing, and it's come back, and exactly as suggested, secretary has been tagged as a person employed to handle correspondence. Letter has been tagged as a written message addressed to a person or organisation. So this is a simple way, and part of the power of ELG is the fact that all integrated services use common APIs that work the same way and looks the same, and share these common tryout GUIs. And if you want to switch from one provider of service to another, there's no change to your code. You just change the which API endpoint you're talking to, and everything else just works. So this is sort of how you would use services. I'm going to do a very quick 2-minute coverage of what you would do to publish your own services on the ELG platform. So if you've got services that you want to produce, you want to make available through ELG, it's basically a 4-step process. First, you have to actually implement the ELG specified API, and then package your tool as a container image in the way that Stelios talked about earlier on. Everything's done through Docker images. Describe your service using ELG metadata, and then submit it for the validation cycle. So the APIs are deliberately kept simple, HTTP-based or HTTPS-based APIs based on simple JSON message structures for text processing services. For services that process binary data, audio and images, it's treated just as it's done exactly the same way as a web form file upload. So pretty much any language should have a library that can cope with that kind of thing. And the input and output types. So we don't necessarily provide, this is an API for machine translation, this is an API for semantic annotation, this is an API for speech recognition. We simply say, this is if you take text, you process a text message. If you produce audio, you return an audio message. So you mix and match as required by your service. So, for example, translation summarization would be text in, text out. Named entity recognition could be text in, annotations out, or indeed audio in and annotations out if it's doing named entity recognition over audio, and so on and so forth. So when you've picked the appropriate API, you implement it. Now, pretty much any programming language will have an HTTP library that can handle JSON messages. For Python and for Java, ELG provides helpers for popular languages that you can use as a basis for your tools. Or you can take any of the open source services that are already out there and use one of them as a template. And the adapter is what I was showing you before with Cogito example. So that was a tool that already has a native HTTP API, but it's not the ELG one. So rather than implementing the ELG API into the existing code base, what the provider chose to do was to essentially sit side by side their native API with an adapter that understands ELG requests, translates them to the native API, and vice versa with the responses. So that's the alternative sort of way of doing this. So you've now got your code that implements this API, package it as a container image, and there are standard tools for this, most notably Docker, but also things like Podman, and there are other tools for specific programming languages. And there are example Docker files in the ELG documentation, and the Java and Python helpers will do a lot of this for you. And like I say, any open source service, you can just take that and use that as an example. The metadata model is largely what Penny covered earlier on, but obviously the technical metadata we also need is things like the location of your image, the endpoint address within the image, the license terms, the input and output formats, and so on. But I haven't got time to go into that in detail now. And then finally, you submit it for validation. So the manual validation process applies to services just as much as it does, if not more so than it does to data resources. So services also go through this process of technical validation where we in the ELG team will deploy your image to our cluster, assign the right tryout UI, test it using whatever sample data that you've provided. And this is an iterative process, so we want to help you. We want to help you to make this work. And the validator will work with you to address any issues that are found. And once everybody's happy, then the service will be published. So that's essentially how services fit into the ELG system. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague Remy now, who will talk about the Python SDK that he's developed to help programmers when interacting with ELG.
Thanks, Jan. Hi, everyone. What I will talk about now is the ELG Python client. So basically, everything that I've been showing you until now is how you can use ELG from the user interface. But we also have many APIs, as Jan suggested, and we also created a Python client so that it will help you to interact with those APIs. So basically, with the Python client, you can do the same as you can do with the user interface. You can search the ELG, you can download hosted corpora, and you can call compatible services. You can do more advanced things, but we won't have the time to show it. Also, the Python client is including also tools so that it can help you to create ELG compatible services if you have an LP tool right in Python that you want to integrate into ELG. And also, it has the capability to deploy ELG services locally if they are publicly available. So let's demonstrate the Python client, and I have for that a Jupyter notebook. Okay, perfect. So the ELG Python client comes as a pip package that you can easily install using pip install ELG. And then from that package, you can import various classes which corresponds to what you can do with the package. So first I will import everything, and then I will show you how we can browse the catalog. So we have the catalog class that we can instantiate, and then we have the search method that we can use to search for specific resources as we can do from the user interface. So we use the same facets. So here we can search for a resource of type tool service with the function machine translation and for English and French. And if I run that, it will respond me Python object. So it will, under the hood, call the ELG API, the ELG search API, and then it will return the results as Python object. So here I'm just printing the first result of the list, which is a machine translation platform for many languages, including English and French, which is what I was looking for. Here is another example following the exact same principle. Just here I'm searching for a corpus in German, which is doing name entity recognition. And if I run that, again, I print the first result, which is GRMeval 2014, a well-known dataset that is corresponding to what I was looking for. Next thing you can do with the Python client, which is, I think, the most interesting part of the Python client, is that you can directly call ELG services from Python. So that's really easy. You can use the service class for that. You need to instantiate a service using its ID. So basically here I'm using the ID 474, which corresponds not to that service, but to, I think that's, yeah, this one, but the older version of that service, but yeah, doesn't matter. Basically, it's a name entity recognition service, and if I run this Python code, it will use the token I already have because I run this this Python code just before. But if I was not logged in, it will ask me to log in, and because we need to be authenticated to be able to use ELG services. And then it calls this discover name entity recognition, and with that input, and the result is what I was looking for. So it's annotations, and it found Nikola Tesla as a person and Berlin as a location. Another thing you can do is you can search for a specific service, and then you can use the results of that search to instantiate a service. So here I'm looking for a machine translation tool from English to French, and then I'm creating a service from the first results of that search. And then again, I can simply run the service, and it will return me the translation in French. Last thing I wanted to show you is how you can download a corpus. It follows the exact same ID that we have with the service. So you can instantiate the corpus from its ID, and then you can download it using the download method. Here it's not an open source license, you need to accept the license, but if I click yes, then it will download it. And again, same thing as for services, you can do a catalog search. It will return you some results, and you can instantiate a corpus from the results and download it. So if and I can accept that, and it will download that. So now that we have seen the main functionalities of the Python client, what I would like to do now is to do a short demo and to show you that we can build real applications using ELG services and using the Python client. So what we will try to do now is we will try to do a very small and basic machine translation system using ELG services. So what I have prepared is some code that I would like to show you. So first of all, what we need to do is to generate an offline token. So by default, the token you get from the authentication system of ELG is valid for only 6 hours. So if you want to create a real application, you need to have something which is valid not for only 6 hours, but for all the time. So first of all, I will run that, run generate offline token. It will ask me to authenticate myself, so I will click on the link. It will bring me to the ELG websites. I need to copy paste that, go back here, paste it, and then it should have generated this file which contains my token that I will then be able to use for my application. And then just to demonstrate that we can use this offline token to call a service. So here I'm calling a translation service from English to Ukrainian. The exact same code I just showed you in the notebook, so I can run that. And so it's calling the Opus MT English to Ukrainian machine translation service. And here is the translation of my sentence, which was, this is the text in English to translate. And so this is the equivalent in Ukrainian. So now that we have our connection to the ELG services, we can build our backend. So here is the code for the backend. I won't go in too much detail, but just to show you that it's really simple. It's only about 30 lines of code. And what is important here is that for each language pair, so I want to do from English to Ukrainian, from Ukrainian to English, English to Russian, and Russian to English. So for each language pair, I'm using a different ELG service. So I put the IDs here, and then I'm exposing an API endpoint so that my front-end can call those services. So I can run my backend. Yeah, perfect. And my front end is also very simple, just a bit of HTML and a bit of JavaScript. Nothing very interesting. And you will see it doesn't look very well, but it works. So let's access my front end. So yeah, as I said, it's a bit ugly, but it's just to demonstrate that it works. So I can type something. So we are all in Brussels for Metaforum, and if I click to translate, what it will do is it will call my backend, and my backend will call the ELG service, which is hosted in our ELG infrastructure. So here I have the translation in Ukrainian, which is what I was looking for. So if I want to add another ELG service to that application, let's say I want that the users can listen to the translation. So I have a second backend, which is already running, and I have also a second front end. Oh no, I need to run the second backend. And I will yeah, sorry. And this one is here. Yeah. So I can use that sentence in Ukrainian. Oops. Copy paste it, translate it back to English. So it's here. And we can listen to that translation. And all of that is powered by ELG services. Oops, why? This is not working. Of course. Okay, it doesn't matter, we don't have the time. But basically what it should do is to give you the audio back from the text. So it will call a text-to-speech service for English. And just following the same principle, just to be quick, what I wanted to show you is that we created this translate.european.languagegrid.eu website, which is basically what I showed you, but with a better user interface that is doing exactly that. So you can translate from English to Ukrainian to Polish or to Russian. So it supports 4 languages. And to quickly finish my presentation, what I wanted to demonstrate to you today is that ELG services have real-world use cases, and that it's really easy to integrate them using the ELG APIs and using also the Python client. So I put here just some examples. You can detect speech in comments to filter them. You can translate conversation between users. You can add speech synthesis to a chatbot. You can extract information from documents. And I think there is also many more applications. And I think with that, I will thank you all for your attention, and that's the end of session 2. Thanks.
So thank you to Remy. Thank you also to Penny from Athens for her presentation at the beginning. And yeah, you'll see another couple of examples of these real-world application that uses ELG services in the next session, which is our kind of showcase of some of the best of ELG. We'll just have we'll need just 2 minutes before that, just to make sure, because we have a number of remote presenters who are going to be joining us for the next session, and we just need to do a final technical check with some of them. But if I can just invite the other session 3 presenters who are here in person to come up on stage with me, and we will get started on that in a couple of minutes.